Okay, so Eric brought up the point about focus in layout, and it made me think of a couple of things because I also use Maya. So let me just show you what I think is happening here quickly as I can. So let's start out with layout. So in layout, if you Shift A, you get well, it's already centered, so you get this geometry centered in the viewport. If you use this, it will center on the pivot. So this centers on the pivot. So let's unlock that for a second and move around like this, and there's the camera. So if I select that, it's around the pivot. This has been in Lightwave for a long time. And then if I deselect or unselect that button, then I can still focus around that, right? And then again, if I click on the object and do that, it will center it, but it doesn't really zoom it in. So I'll deselect that and Shift A, it both centers and zooms in on the object. So that if I go back to the camera, click there, Shift A, zooms and centers and focuses around the camera, and so on. And so the way it's working in Maya is we go here, and F key, obviously that's going to focus in on the geometry. Actually does a little bit better job because it really does center it right in the viewport there for what it's worth. But it can only do that. It can only center on the geometry if you do the F key like this. So to get what I think Eric was wanting was be able to focus on a particular area, you could you could F key, and then you'd be able to do that in component mode. But you have to be in component mode. If you're not, F key brings you back to here. To sort of make that easier to see, let's go to component mode, and let's move this entire group of cubes off to the side. And I'll go back to object mode, make sure that's selected, then hit the F key, and as you can see, it's centered around the geometry even if the pivot is over there. Equivalent in Lightwave would be to take this same object here and translate it off to this, translate it off to the side like that, save it, and then switch back over to layout, and then make sure everything's cool there, and then there is that guy. And if I Shift A, it brings the geometry there, just like in Maya, although Maya kind of brings it here, which is a little better. I always find that annoying in layout, but anyway. So Shift A brings it to there. At least it's focusing it and more or less zooming in on it as far as geometry. Notice how it's different it is from when you select the camera and Shift A. The camera's right there. I don't know why it doesn't do the same thing with geometry. That's a side note. But it's basically working the same way as Maya, F key in this case. So now if I click on this icon there, then now we're shifting to the pivot of that object, which is over here. And that's different. Seems like it's the same thing when you do it on a light. For example, like the light, it's centered already. So if I move the light over here, and then I hit this key, it centers the light but doesn't zoom in on it. If I Shift A, it zooms in on it also. So that's how that works. That's the difference between Maya, Lightwave Layout, and Lightwave Modeler as far as the Shift A key and this button. So I think what we would need to get what Eric wants in layout would be some way to select components in layout. I think. I don't know that there would be any other way to do it. I could be wrong, but that's what I think he's asking for if I have it right. So hopefully this demonstration clarifies that a little bit.